Hi, this is the video run through for the B1 C1 P1 higher past paper 4. Please remember that you've always got these equations in the front of your paper. These are specifically useful for the physics section, which sometimes has just calculations to do, and all you have to do is find the right equation to use. But the first unit is biology. So the first question is, Conus magnus is a large tropical sea snail. The sea snail feeds on fish. When it detects a fish, it fires a hook into it. The hook contains a powerful poison which paralyzes the fish. The poison stops the release of neurotransmitters. Explain how this paralyzes the fish. So there's 2 marks here. First mark is we're talking about the fact that it prevents the impulses passing across synapses. So that's your first mark. It prevents impulses crossing synapses. And the second mark is that therefore the muscles cannot contract. For your 2 marks. You could also say that the electrical signal can't pass across the synapses, but you can't say messages or information. And for the second mark, you could also say that they can't control their muscles. That would also be fine. If you said that motor neurons are not stimulated, that's also fine. So a few ways to word the same things there. Next question. Scientists are investigating the poison produced by the snail. They think that it could be used as a painkiller in humans. Describe how a double-blind trial will be designed to see if the poison works. Again, 2 marks here. So the first mark is for stating the fact that this uses a drug and also a placebo. So uses both of those. And then the second mark is saying what the double-blind bit means. So it's the idea that neither the people or the doctors know which is which during the experiment. Next question. So Linda has a mass of 60 kilograms. She wants to find out if she is eating the correct amount of protein. She starts to work out the protein content of all the food she eats in one day. So there's a table of those results. Is Linda eating the correct amount of protein? Complete the table and calculate Linda's estimated average daily requirement of protein, the EAR, to help explain your answer. So the first thing we've got to do is complete the table. So here's the mass eaten in grams and the protein content put 100 grams of food. So the first one, 200 grams of baked potato, there's 2 grams per 100 grams, that's 4 grams of protein in Linda's food. The next one is 50 grams and 0.8 per 100, so that's going to be 0.4. And then just adding those together, that'll add up to 51 grams. And then calculating the EAR, so the EAR is 0.6 times her body mass. So it tells you her mass is 60 kilograms, so it's 0.6 times 60, which equals 36 grams for her EAR. So that means that if you look at how much she is eating and how much she should eat, she's eating more than enough. So is Linda eating the correct amount of protein? You could say that yes, she is getting more than enough, but you could also say no, because she's eating more than she should, or too much protein. So yes or no would be fine there, as long as you back it up. Linda and Sue are both 30 years old and are the same mass. Suggest and explain a possible reason why Sue might need more protein than Linda. So there's a couple of reasons here, but there's 2 marks, so you could say each one. So you could say that Sue would need more protein if she was pregnant, or if she's breastfeeding, or has a more physical mode of life, more exercise, or recovering from injury, any of those. And then you can need to say that why she needs more protein. So she needs more protein as she's providing nutrition for a baby, or to increase, repair her muscle or repair tissues, or she needs protein for the growth of the baby. So obviously those 2 things need to link. But the first mark is giving a reason why she'd need more protein, and then saying why that would need more protein. And then 3 of Linda's friends do not eat meat. Suggest how these friends can achieve a balanced diet. So you need to say that there needs to be an alternative supply of protein if it's not coming from the meat. So there's your first mark, the idea that protein needs to come from elsewhere. and then just say a few things, well, one thing that it could come from. So there's a big list in the mark scheme. So you could say dairy products, milk, cheese, eggs, tofu, beans, pulses, nuts, lentils. You could say corn, as in corn, frozen corn, avocado, broccoli, spinach, peas, asparagus. Any of those will get you the mark for saying where the protein would come from. Next question, sweat glands in the skin release sweat. Explain how sweat can cool the body down. Again, 2 marks for this. So first mark saying that the sweat evaporates. You've got to use the word evaporates. So there's your first mark, that the sweat evaporates. And the second mark is the idea that then takes the heat from the skin. So you could say that heat is lost from the body, or it takes heat from the body. You can't say that it cools down the body because it tells you that in the question. So the second mark is saying that it takes heat from body or skin. Next question, some people sweat too much. This is called hyperhidrosis. Scientists have discovered this is caused by a dominant allele. Look at this family tree, there it is. Gemma and Leroy are expecting a 4th child. What is the probability that they will have hyperhidrosis? And explain how you worked out your answer. So probably the best way to explain and also work this out here is by drawing a diagram. Drawing this sort of diagram, so it tells you that tells you who's got hyperhidrosis and who hasn't. So Gemma has, but one of her offspring hasn't, which suggests that Gemma has got 1 recessive gene. Leroy must have 2 recessive genes, so because he hasn't got it. So we can just draw the 2 recessive genes as 2 little h's, and the other one, so what's her name again? Gemma, yeah. And so then we can just link these up, so you can see that there's a 50-50 chance of the offspring having the dominant gene. So the probability is 50%. To get the marks for the explanation, you must ensure that you use the right types of allele for Gemma and Leroy, and ensure that you label which one's which. So Leroy is both recessive, and Gemma has a dominant and recessive. Next question, Gemma's doctor injects her with a drug that makes her sweat less. Put a tick in the box that describes what this drug changes. So this changes Gemma's phenotype, but not her genotype. So that's the bottom one there. So that's for 1 mark. And the drug contains an antigen made by bacteria. The drug stops the sweat glands working for about 4 months. It only works for this long because the antigens are gradually destroyed by Gemma's body. Explain how Gemma's body destroys antigens. So there's 2 marks here, and there's 3 things you could put. So any 2 from white blood cells release antibodies or antitoxins. And then you could say that the antibodies or antitoxins lock onto the antigens and destroy them. And you could also say that the white blood cells engulf the antigens. So any 3 of those. Sorry, any 2 of those 3. I apologise. Next question is a 6-mark question. So I'd like to mark these yourself, please, using the mark schemes that can be found on the Google site, which you can get to via the address that's on the poster. If you're unsure, though, whether you've marked it correctly, then please see your teacher and they'll be able to tell you. Next question. It is not possible from the pie chart to work out how many of the 1 million people have high blood pressure. Explain why. So the reason here is because that 29% have 2 of the conditions only, but we do not know which 2. So 29% have 2 of the conditions, but we don't know which 2 those are. Next section is a chemistry section. So first question is about the gases in air. Clean air is a mixture of gases. Complete the table to show the percentage of gases in clean air. So 78% is nitrogen, 21% is oxygen, and don't be fooled into thinking the rest is carbon dioxide, because there are other things in air as well. So carbon dioxide has a percentage of 0.035, quite a very small amount, but the amount is important. If you put between 0.03 and 0.04 for carbon dioxide, then that would also be fine. If you've got all of them correct, that's 2 marks. If you've only got 2 of them correct, that's or 1 of them, then that's only 1 mark. Next question. Carbon monoxide and oxides of nitrogen are pollutants found in air. Explain why it is important that atmospheric pollution is controlled. So there's 2 marks here. So any 2 from, you could say that the air is safe to breathe, or to reduce asthma. You could say to prevent harm to living things. You could say that carbon monoxide is poisonous or toxic, which is talking about here. You could say to control or reduce smog. You could say protect buildings. You could say to reduce the damage to the ozone layer. And you could also say to reduce the effect of acid rain. Catalytic converters are fitted to cars to help reduce air pollution from carbon monoxide, CO, and nitrogen monoxide, NO. What happens in that catalytic converter? Include a balanced symbol equation in your answer. So here it expects you to know that nitrogen and carbon dioxide are made when these 2 things are combined. So the balanced symbol equation will be carbon monoxide plus nitrogen monoxide, and that will make carbon dioxide and nitrogen. And to balance that, you need 2's in front of all of those. So there's 1 mark for the formulae, 1 mark for the balancing, for the correct balancing, and then another mark for the description of the fact that carbon monoxide is converted into carbon dioxide. So there's your 3rd mark. Air quality in the UK has improved over the last 60 years. In December 1952, air pollution was so bad that in London that sometimes people could not see their own feet. Look at the graph. It shows the number of deaths each day in London between the 3rd of December and the 15th of December 1952. It also shows the concentrations of smoke and sulfur dioxide. Describe the relationship between the number of deaths and the concentrations of smoke and sulfur dioxide. So the first thing you can see is that as the concentration, or that as the smoke increased, so did the number of deaths. So that's the first thing. As the smoke increased, so did the number of deaths. And then the second mark is for then linking the sulfur dioxide. So you can see also as the sulfur dioxide increased, the number of deaths increased. So as the sulfur dioxide increased, so did the number of deaths. So there's your 2 marks, linking the smoke to the deaths and then the sulfur dioxide to the deaths. Next question, look at the displayed formulas of some compounds. So compound F is not a hydrocarbon. How can you tell from the displayed formula? There's 2 ways to go about this. So there's compound F. You can either say that it's not made of carbon and hydrogen only, but you've got to get that word only in, but it's probably easier to explain why it's not, and that's because it's got this oxygen. So you can just say because it contains oxygen, and that'll get you that mark. And then which compound is unsaturated? So unsaturated means there's a double bond, but it has to be between carbon and carbon. So that's compound D. This one's between carbon and oxygen. Compound D is between carbon and carbon. So D is your answer there. And then which compound is a polymer? So remember, polymers are drawn like this with brackets with the N to represent that there's lots of these joined together. So that's compound E. And then compound E makes an addition polymer. Draw the displayed formula of this addition polymer. So there's compound D. So I'll just draw that at the bottom just so I can then draw the polymer. So to draw the polymer, first draw these 2 carbons without the double bond. So you just put a single bond between them, and then the other bond goes either side of the carbons with brackets. Then all you need to do is just join the 4 things that are around the carbons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and H's, and then finally you put an N. Now, what you need to ensure you do is if you draw both of these, then cross out the one that is not the one you want marked. So that is your answer there. Chemicals called esters can be used as solvents. Sarah investigates how good 4 different solvents are at removing a stain from cotton. There it is. Look at her results. Which solvent is the most suitable for removing stains from cotton? So you've got a number of results here. So you've got the effect on the cotton and the percentage of the stain that's removed. So first thing, you need to make sure that the solvent does not affect the cotton. So A and C cannot be used, so only B and D. And then which one's the most effective out of those two? Well, it's D, because it removes the most of the stain. So D is your answer, and then here you have to explain it. So D gets you 1 mark, and the second mark is saying something like that it removes most of the stain without damaging the cotton. Sarah thinks the results do not provide sufficient evidence to make a firm conclusion. What further tests would help her make a conclusion more secure? So there's 2 marks here, and there's a number of different points you could make. So any two of repeating the experiment. You could say to carry out the experiment with more temperatures. You could say do the experiment for a longer time. You could say test on different types of stain, because you've only done one stain there, and test on different types of cotton. So any two of those 5 things would get you those 2 marks. Now this next question is a 6-mark question, which I'm going to leave as I said in the biology section. Please can you mark this yourself using the mark scheme that's online via the Google site. Ask your teacher if you're unsure whether you've marked it correctly. The LPG fraction contains propane gas C3H8. Write a balanced symbol equation for the incomplete combustion of propane and oxygen. Only carbon monoxide and water are made. So there's 2 marks here, one for writing out and one for balancing it. So the first thing to do is draw an arrow, then draw the things that are being reacted together on this side, and you can see that it tells you that it burns, this burns in oxygen. So you've got C3H8. Notice where I am drawing the numbers. You can't draw that like this, okay, or like this. You've got to make sure that they're low and that these are capital letters if they are in the equations here, in the formulae, sorry, here. Just scribble those out. So what is being made? Well, it's told you that carbon monoxide is made, it's incomplete combustion, and also water, which it expects you to know the symbol for, which is H2O. Then you've got to balance. That gets you 1 mark if you've written that out, even if you've balanced it incorrectly. The next thing to do is balance it. So first thing you've got to do is balance the number of carbons. So you've got 3 carbons here and only 1 here. So you're going to put 3 in front of the carbon monoxide. Then you've got 8 hydrogens, but only 2 here. So you need 4 waters to get 8 overall, 8 hydrogens overall. And then you're going to balance the oxygen. So we've got 4 from the waters. We've got 3 from the carbon monoxides, the next 7. So we need 3.5, which you can also write as 7 over 2 oxygens. And on to the physics section. So Alan wants to reduce energy losses from his house. He asks an energy advisor for help. The advisor uses a camera to produce a thermogram of his house. Explain how the thermogram can be used to compare how much heat energy is lost from different parts of the house. So there's 2 marks here. So you'd say that most heat is lost from hot, insulated or poorly insulated areas, which is indicated by white, yellow or red colours, and the least heat is lost from well insulated areas, which is black, dark blue or purple. So this is the idea of what the different colours would mean in terms of insulation. So poorly insulated has got the most heat is lost, which is white, yellow and red, and least heat is lost from the well insulated areas, which are dark, black, blue, black or purple. You could also get a combination of these ideas. So red areas are hot and lose most heat, purple areas are cold and lose the least heat. So you just got to link the colours to whether that meant it was hot or cold and losing the most or least heat. The energy advisor draws a diagram of Alan's house. It shows where some of the energy losses happen. Energy saving methods are used to reduce energy losses from his house. The table shows some costs and savings for 4 of these methods. The advisor tells Alan that he should install methods C and D in his house. To complete the table and use the information to explain why C and D are the best methods for Alan to install. So let's first complete the table. So there's the cost to fit it, and here's the annual savings, how much they save per year in the energy bills. So all you've got to do is work out how many years it would take before this is paid back, and that's the payback time. So this first one is 4,800 divided by 100. So that's 48 years for your first one for double glazed windows. Next one is 270 divided by 45, which is 6. Then 90 divided by 30, which is 3. And 240 divided by 120, which is 2. So if you've got all four of those, that's one of the marks. And then you need to set, so it says complete the table and use information to explain why they're the best methods. So the first mark is saying that C and D have the lowest payback times. So that's the second mark. You get the first mark for all four of those, second mark for those, and then the third mark is for saying that therefore C and D, they save more annually than A and B, or are cheaper to fit, or reduce energy losses by 50%. So your third mark could be for saying that they're cheaper to fit. There you get your third mark. The energy advisor also suggests that Alan replaces old central heating boiler. The Sankey diagram shows the energy data of Alan's boiler, there it is, can calculate the efficiency of Alan's boiler, give your answer as a percentage. So here's the amount of energy that goes in, and this is the amount of energy wasted. So out of 10,000 joules, you got 3,000 joules wasted. So that means that there must be 7,000 joules that is useful. So this efficiency is the amount of energy that's useful divided by the amount of energy that's put in, times by 100, and that will give you 70%. If you just wrote 70, then that's 3 marks. Alan thinks that some of the energy completely disappears. How could the advisor use the Sankey diagram to explain that this was not scientifically correct? So 1 mark here, so you could say either that that energy is conserved, or you could say that the wasted energy is given to the surroundings or the atmosphere, or you could say that wasted energy and useful energy add up to the total energy put in. So either of those two ideas would get you that 1 mark. Damien wants to cook a curry he bought at the supermarket. He looks at the label on the packaging of the meal. Explain in detail, so this is your 6 mark question. Sorry, I started reading before I realised it was a 6 mark question, which I'd like you to mark yourself using the mark scheme online, or ask your teacher if you're unsure about whether you've got which marks you've got. Microwaves are also used for mobile phone messages. Damien is worried about allowing his children to use mobile phones. He finds evidence in some reports about possible dangers. Look at the notes he made. So there's A, B and C. You can read those yourself. Damien decided to allow his children to use mobile phones after considering the evidence from these reports. Suggest reasons why he did this. So you could say any of these. So you could say that less people studied, or there's less evidence in A compared with C. You could say that there's a shorter time study in A compared with C. You could say that there's more research for mobile phones than against it. You could say that the study about old people and not about young people. So in C, you could see, if you look at there's they were aged 30 or over, and and his children won't be that old. You could say that the study about the rat cells would not be representative of humans. You could say that A and B and C conflict each other. And so any one of those things, and then for the second mark, you could say that the risk outweighs, the benefits outweigh the possible risk. So the idea that having a mobile phone means that you're safer. You could say that children social interaction with mobile phones, something like that. Layla heats a liquid in a beaker for 500 seconds and records temperature. Look at the graph of the results. Write down a time interval during which all of the energy supplied was used to change the state of the liquid, and explain how the energy supply causes this change of state. So when the temperature doesn't change here, that's when there is a change of state. So time interval is 300 to 500 seconds. And what is that heat being used for? It's being used to break the bonds. So the energy is used to break bonds rather than increase its temperature. So 1 mark for that, and 1 mark for that. So next question. Rita is learning about different types of waves. Electromagnetic waves are used for communication. Infrared waves can transmit signals from one end of a fibre optic cable to the other. It gives you the wavelength and the speed. It asks you to calculate the frequency of the infrared waves. If you look at the front of your paper, you will find the formula for this. So wave speed equals wavelength times frequency. So you just got to rearrange that. So to work out the frequency, you're going to divide the wave speed by the wavelength. And that will give you frequency. So you're going to do 2.2 times 10 to the 8 divided by 1.5 times 10 to the minus 6, and that gives you 1.5 times 10 to the minus 14. 1.5 times 10 to the 14. I apologise. There you are. So divide 2.2 times 10 to the 8 divided by 1.5 times 10 to the minus 6 gives you 1.5 times 10 to the 14. When the infrared radiation leaves the fibre, it is refracted as it enters the air. Rita makes a table to compare the speed, wavelength and frequency of the infrared signal in the air and in the optical fibre. Complete the table by putting one tick in each row. So the speed and the wavelength in air is greater than in the fibre, but the frequency will stay the same as in the fibre. And then Rita learns that digital signals are used in optical fibres. Digital signals are used to transmit signals over large distances. As the signal strength falls, it is amplified at points along the cable. Describe and explain the advantage of using digital signals for transmitting information along optical fibres. So there's 2 marks here, one for describing, one for explaining. So either of these will get you 1 mark. There's a rapid transmission of data, or that it's easier to remove the noise. So one of those 2 get you the first mark, and then the second mark has to come from one of these. So the idea that you can send multiple signals, or you can multiplex, you can say that the picture is clearer, or you can say that the noise isn't amplified. So just add up your marks, write it on your poster, and try the next paper.